Shout out to everyone using my code FUJI1K in the item shop. Don't forget to send me videos of you using my code when purchasing cosmetics in the item shop for the chance to be featured in a future video. Over the last 6 months, Fortnite players have endured Epic's onslaught of different metas, OP weapons and ridiculous map changes. I for one found it extremely difficult to grind the game as much as I did during my first month on keyboard and mouse. Despite multiple breaks, I still managed to make a ton of progress in the last 6 months. But the question is, just how much progress did I make? In order to answer this, I'm gonna have to take you back to the beginning. Now I know a lot of my subscribers are big fans of my progression video series and have been long awaiting this video from me. Hundreds of thousands of people have viewed this series in particular, so I wanted to make sure that I spent a significant amount of time editing this video so that I truthfully captured the essence of my first 6 months on keyboard and mouse. Because of the extra time I have taken, I've added an extra month of progress at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around for the whole thing. In the next portion of the video, you're about to see months 2 to 6 of my progression with a bonus 7th month. So grab a snack, relax, and enjoy my 6-month progression. Month 2 was pretty much a continuation of month 1. I was still using a modified version of Cypher PK's binds, which I come to change later on in the month. It's really crazy to look back at some of these clips that I had back in month 2 when I compare them to how I play now. This is going to be a really insightful video for me to break down for you guys. So firstly, I'd like to address my aim during my 2nd month. I was definitely getting more comfortable with aiming with my mouse now, although I didn't really ADS much with my shotgun in fights, which is a habit I started to develop recently. If you don't ADS with your shotgun at all when box fighting, I highly suggest you pick up the habit of doing so as soon as possible. The stark difference you will see in your damage dealt to opponents will really show you the value of ADSing. I consistently started to hit pump shots for 150 plus damage when I started implementing ADSing as a part of my box fighting strategy. One of the great things that begins to happen when you develop control is that you start to gain the ability to play mind games with your opponents. As you can see in this clip, I was able to play mind games with my opponent and bait him into shooting out his own cone, leaving him open for a free shot. Earlier in my progression, I wouldn't have had the forethought to predict my opponent's behavior. As you continue to improve as a player, it becomes more than just building, editing and shooting your weapon. It becomes more about using these techniques in a way that outsmarts your opponent, allowing you to dictate the pace of an engagement, largely resulting in you coming out as the victor. As my confidence grew, so too did my ability as a solo player. Solos is one of my favourite game modes to this day. I know many people hate solos, but I can attribute a lot of my poise during fights now to the time I put into playing solos. Here's a small solo pop-off game I had midway through my 2nd month. Is that a llama? I'm lining up the llama, guys. There he is. I do that always. Oh, the bunny ears are in the way, bro. I'm trash.
cracked. Hold on, reload. Let's go. Bro, I messed up that edit.
On the final day of the month, I changed my binds for the first time. Now this significantly set me back in terms of my progression, and this won't be the first time that I changed them in this video. Since I started with someone else's binds in the beginning, over time I felt as if they could be optimized to more suit what I felt was comfortable for me. If you're just wishing to keep it amongst yourself, I would watch a video on what the most optimal binds are before creating your own binds. But the likelihood is that you will end up changing at least a couple of them to better suit your needs. It is very rare for two players to be in complete agreement between what binds are the most comfortable. Even though it set me back in the short term, in the long term I definitely saw the benefit and still use a majority of the binds I switched to back then on present day. In month 3, my mechanics took a major setback due to the changing of my binds. Subsequently, I was spending a lot of time in creative relearning the muscle memory I had developed for techniques like ramp tunnels, 90s and ramp rushes. At first, it was a little discouraging to witness just how much progress I had lost, but I had solid reasoning behind my decision to change. If I continued to grind daily in creative, I knew I would soon surpass what I was able to achieve with my old binds. During the month of May, I was also hosting my weekly 4v4 box fight tournament over on my Twitch channel during the height of the coronavirus lockdown. The Quarantine League consisted of 20 rounds of free-for-all solo box fights, where the top 6 placing players would go on to qualify to be selected by one of the team captains. I made a video explaining how it works earlier in the year, and you should find it linked via a card and in the video description. The reason I bring this up is because England has entered another month of lockdown as of November the 5th due to the rise in cases, and a version 2 of QL has been requested by a lot of my community. If this gains enough traction, I will consider bringing it back for the month of lockdown. All you have to do is join my Discord server and upvote this message in the suggestions channel to let me know that you are interested. Back to the progression. As I got more and more used to my binds, you could really see my confidence start to grow as a player. My playstyle became more aggressive and I was a lot more confident in taking fights. Unfortunately, I didn't record much footage in the month of May, but take my word for it when I say I was still making a lot of progress. Now, in stark contrast to my previous 2 months, months 4 and 5 were some of my lowest recorded playtime months since I started playing Fortnite in the summer of 2018. If we take a look at my Twitch tracker between May and July, you can see that my frequency of streams hadn't really changed much. If anything, I was streaming more frequently. But if you look deeper into the data, I began streaming other games like Valorant and GTA 5 because I was simply getting bored of Fortnite. I was also playing NBA 2K on my PS4 with my friends, since many of my IRL friends had quit playing Fortnite. I know that it can be extremely tough staying motivated with your grind, particularly when you are grinding alone for most of it. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that I did take some time off in my progression. Not as an excuse for my lack of skill increase, but to share with you guys that it's okay to want to play other games. Let's not forget that Fortnite Battle Royale has been out since late 2017, and that is a long time to be playing one single game. Epic does try their best to keep the game engaging and refreshing for its player base, but when big creators such as Ninja, Courage, Tim the Tapman and others are moving on to other titles, it just goes to show that sometimes breaks are needed. Unless you wish to compete at a pro level and make earnings in a competitive scene, it can be really mentally unhealthy to force yourself to play a game that you aren't enjoying. Month 6 was a refreshing month for me. I started playing a lot more consistently after taking a short break. Arena Trios was a great addition to the game which really kept me engaged and wanting to play the game. Although I don't really enjoy trios as much anymore, I did find solace in trios as it was really enjoyable playing with others and grinding to Champions Division. The weeks of playing trios unfortunately had a detrimental effect to my performance as a solo player. I had quickly fallen behind the meta despite all the progress I had made back in May. Around this time we started to see the evolution of the piece control meta, which had been introduced to us by many elite level players. Like most players, I never like to feel like I'm behind on the meta, so this is when I really started to spend a lot of time in creative. I saw a severe gap in my skill and wanted to improve my mechanics as we transitioned into the piece control meta. I'm not as mechanically skilled as someone like Clicks, however my building and editing definitely got better. Since piece control is still relevant to the meta today, I would like to share some of the maps I personally use to improve my own piece control. As we transitioned into the new season and the pump shotgun was reintroduced into the game, I really felt like my aim was at an extremely high level compared to my earlier months. Hitting 200 pumps was becoming a consistent thing. I think I can attribute this to playing FPS games like Valorant, because it really helped develop my aim on keyboard and mouse, and this is especially true if Fortnite is your only experience with aiming with a mouse up until this point. I know many of you struggle with hitting your shots on keyboard and mouse. It is by far the biggest complaint I get in my comments and in my Discord server. If you didn't already know, I have made a video on how to improve your aim, which should be linked in the video description. Another thing I started doing, which I adopted from pro players, is hyping myself up after every elimination, regardless of how good the play was. Being your own hype man can give you a sense of self-confidence, which carries itself with you throughout the rest of the game. This is especially prominent during tournaments. I never understood why players like Benji would say that they were the best player until I started doing it myself. It also helps a lot with tilting. I find myself being able to play for longer periods of time since my mood was much more improved during this process. Now month 7 was a month of many changes, but before I address the changes I'd made, I'd like to acknowledge what really allowed me to elevate my game the most throughout the initial 6 months. One thing I noticed that allowed me to make the biggest improvements in my game was playing creative against people who were better than me. If there is one thing that you take away from this video, it is that increasing the difficulty of the training stimulus forces you as a player to either quit or adapt. I see too many new players limiting themselves by playing with the same people under the same conditions, which is severely stunting their growth as a player. I understand that not everyone has the desire to be an elite level player, so the preceding statement only applies to those who do. Players of all skill levels play Fortnite on a daily basis, but to truly become a great player, you have to seek out a greater training stimulus. And a simple way to do this is through the creative matchmaking system. Once you join a lobby, identify the good players and send them a friend request. Ask them what they did to get to their skill level and even challenge them to some realistics or build fights so that you can pick up on new techniques and strategies that were previously unknown to you. So the first major change I made to my settings was switching to stretch res from native. Previously I had never thought about switching to stretch res, even in the height of its popularity, mainly because I was so used to playing on native from my days on console and didn't really understand the potential benefits of switching. After a few suggestions and this Jerian video, I decided to give stretch resolution a chance, specifically the resolution of 1722 by 1070, the quote-unquote secret res that the pros had been hiding from us. Sadly, I do not have the footage from the day that I made the switch, but I can say the increase in pixel density for character models was a huge upside for using stretched over native, and subsequently I found myself hitting a lot more shots. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. Some may argue that it's a placebo, and I argue that they're capping because the evidence, for me at least, was crystal clear. There was a near night and day difference once I had spent a couple weeks on stretch res. Initially, it does take a small amount of getting used to due to the offset crosshair, but with any setting, once you've adjusted to it, you can really start to see the benefits. In rare circumstances where I had switched back to native, character models appeared much skinnier and harder to hit, which just goes to show that it wasn't a placebo and that stretch res really was the real deal. Since it is a visual setting, I would 100% recommend trying it for yourself if you haven't already. You can find the link to the video on stretch res in the description. Now in my most recent settings video that I released in June, I was playing on a 12% Sens at 800 DPI. A month or so later, I had increased my Sens to 13.5 in order to improve my mechanics. I stuck with this Sens for a while. Although my mechanics and ability to free build improved slightly, my aim, especially when tracking targets at a distance, greatly suffered, and in the long run, that trade-off wasn't worth it for me. So during early September, I decided to lower my Sens to 10% at 800 DPI. Now this sense is still fairly high. I can name more than a handful of elite mechanical players who play at a lower sense than my current one. I just felt as if too drastic a change would have caused me to lose the progress I had made in my mechanics at the highest sense. 10% just felt like a comfortable medium. Switching to E as my edit bind instead of F made a huge difference in my ability to edit quickly and consistently. I am by no means the fastest editor, however once I overcame the muscle memory I created using F for over half a year, it felt like E was tailor-made to be the default edit bind on keyboard and mouse. Do I recommend everyone try out E as the edit bind if they haven't already? Not necessarily. Not everyone can commit the time to learning a new bind. Furthermore, an analysis of the edit binds used by the top competing pros shows that a variety of binds ranging from G to F to E and even left shift can be effective, so take my decision to change with a grain of salt. Since I was changing my edit bind, I wanted to make final changes to any binds that I felt were holding me back in an attempt to make them as optimal as possible. I switched my cone from C to R and pickaxe from E to F, which was the inverse of my edit bind. I personally do not encourage changing your binds as frequently as I have, especially if they are already optimal or if you're already comfortable with your current binds. The constant resetting of muscle memory will only continue to set you back, which is why many elite players have begun to settle on their binds in the recent metas. One of the world's best players, EVGA, uses a setting known as switch quick bar, which he binds to one of his mouse buttons. Now for the majority of players, this bind is seldom used. However, for EVGA, it is an essential bind in his gameplay. If you want to know more about that specifically, check out this video that Jerian made about it after he finished this video. He attempted to make his binds more optimal and did away with his switch quick bar bind, which he had been using since before the World Cup. Now long story short, he switched back to his original binds, which just goes to show that sometimes optimal binds can be overrated. Nevertheless, I thought I would mention this in case any new keyboard and mouse players were contemplating changing their binds. On top of this, I recently made the switch to confirm edit on release after many recommendations from the people in my community, mainly from Zozo, my Discord mod, and Toby, who's also one of the players I've played with a lot on stream. I think this change, coupled with changing my edit bind to E, really propelled my edit consistency to new heights. Going from pressing my edit bind 6 times on a triple edit to only 3 made it more consistent for me, and I was less prone to getting stuck in edits, which really was an issue for me, even this deep into my progression. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Getting used to releasing left click as my confirm did take some getting used to, but I digress. I honestly feel like the topic of editing, specifically the debate whether you should have edit on release on or off, deserves a dedicated video of its own, so I won't drag on about it any longer. Now I know in the last month or so I've made a lot of changes to various settings and binds. However, I genuinely feel that I have found the sweet spot in my progression. This is not to say that things won't change at all, but I feel confident that my settings are at their most optimal. I never use settings as an excuse for not being an elite player, and I never will. I just felt as if these changes were necessary for me and my progression. Every individual will have their own unique results, and you will have to use your own discernment when deciding what is going to benefit you versus what is going to hinder your progress. As you guys can see from the progression, I faced a lot of challenges in my first 6 months on keyboard and mouse. If you haven't already, I suggest you go back and watch my initial 1 week progression video as well as my 1 month. The key thing to notice is how I started to reach a plateau. In the early weeks, I was seeing much more noticeable progress since I was much further from the peak of my potential. Compare this to later months where I began to approach my peak, you can see that the progress is much more slow and gradual. Does this mean that I'm not improving month on month? Quite the contrary, it's just the improvement is a lot less noticeable, especially when there isn't as much of a change in meta as there was earlier in Fortnite's lifetime. I know a lot of you watching this video have made the switch yourselves or are waiting to once you've bought the right equipment. If I was to leave you with only one piece of advice, it is to expect this plateau and try not to be discouraged when your progress seems slow or stagnant. I'm still just as happy with my progress in these 6 months as I was in my first week and first month. I know that I can still become a much better player than I am now, and I am nowhere near close to being content with my current skill level. It has been tough balancing content creation with playing daily in order to improve, but it is a balance that I'm getting better at managing by the day. It really has been over 70 days since my last upload, so I know that it's going to be a grind to get back onto that YouTube algorithm. So if you made it this far into the video, obviously you found it entertaining, so go ahead and drop me a like. It really helps out the channel. Also consider subscribing so that you get notified when I release future videos. With that being said, keep gaming guys, and I'll see you in the next one.